A woman at age 20 has, on average, twice the testosterone that she will at age 40. So if you compare an average woman at age 20 to a woman at age 40 with half the testosterone, at age 20, you're on top of the world. You have absolutely no reason to be. You have no finance. You have no control of anything that's going on. You are going to school, working a part-time job. You have a social calendar. You have your family, your mom and dad, brothers, sisters to interact with. You get maybe 3 hours of sleep at night, and yet that is when we usually feel the best in the world. Fast forward now to age 40, 45, 50, where now you've worked 20 or 30 years to get to where you are, career, family, some finance starting to come together for you, and yet you end up in the fetal position crying in the corner because you feel like the world is caving in around you. A lot of that has to do with testosterone and how it makes you feel. Testosterone is the feel-good hormone. And a lot of people will say that libido and testosterone and women are the trio. My take on libido and testosterone in women is that it's a far more complex response, and that if you can take a woman that feels awful about everything, that has no confidence and no sense of well-being and just feels like everything is crashing down around her, and take all that away so that now she feels like she's in control and she feels like she has energy and she's not so fatigued, then libido is something that will come out of that secondarily. New England Journal studies showed that women with low libido and low testosterone, they had their testosterone replaced, and then 80% of them had their libido increase. It didn't look at other forms of well-being, though. It just looked at straight up libido. So that's something to think about, but it's really the big well-being and energy, and builds bone. So how do you treat menopause? Herbs have been around for a long time, Chinese herbs. They have some biologic activity. I have a lot of women that come to me in my clinic and say, I've been taking these herbs and they worked for a while, but they just don't work anymore. I'm starting to break through those herbs, and they want to know if they can stay on them. Sure, probably you can. Let's start up some hormones though and see if that can make it even better. Synthetic hormones came along after the herbs, and so this is the stuff that we don't want to use now because we think there are a lot of problems with it, and that's what the Women's Health Initiative showed. But that was the next step, and then we're going on to bioidentical hormones now, which is the same thing that your body makes, or would have made were it to keep making it. So what's the difference between bioidentical and biosimilar hormones, or the synthetic hormones? Well, this is the difference between man and woman. Okay, this is Adam and Eve, and the difference here is that this hydrogen atom right here is missing from testosterone, and that changes the entire thing. Everything else on here is the same. Now, obviously, this is a simplified two-dimensional structure of a three-dimensional object, but if you take off this hydrogen, oxygen is going to have a double bond with that carbon. Carbon's going to have 4 bonds, and so taking off this hydrogen changes the structure of the entire molecule, and now you have the only difference between man and woman is that hydrogen. So here are the differences between a couple of Premarins and one of the human estrogens, and it's very clear that they're different, and if the difference between man and woman is just one of those bonds, then what's the difference going to cause in here? And that's where we get all the damage done by the synthetic estrogens. Cancer risk. This slide's a little bit dated now, as of a couple of weeks ago. Women's Health Initiative reported on Prempro and showed an increased risk of cancer, especially breast cancer. No studies on bioidentical hormones have shown an increased risk of cancer. This really needs to be updated, and I should have updated it earlier today, but as of about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a study published that showed no matter what form of estrogen you're on, there is some increase in ovarian cancer. That's something that I need to counsel my patients on now. Again, it's not a really big impact in my office because I don't use a lot of estrogen. I don't have to. Most of my patients have enough on their own, but it's something that we'll talk about whenever you come and see me as to whether you need estrogen at all or not, and whether you feel like it's worth the risk of ovarian cancer. One thing about ovarian cancer is we care a lot about it because it's lethal and it's very difficult to detect, but it's not a very common cancer, thankfully, and a small increase in a not very common cancer across the world is still a small increase. It's not a very large increase, but if you have it, it's 100% for you, and if you don't have it, it's 100% that you don't have it. So it's just something, one of the complex things that we need to talk about in the office during the appointment. Andropause. This is sort of a new made-up word over the past couple of years. It now is in Mosby's dictionary, so I guess that makes it official.
Menopause.
Yeah, menopause. This is the changes in life that men go through that are not really recognized very well, even still. So we're all in here, talking about hormonal changes in women. In women, it's very abrupt, and women know that they're going to have this happen to them. From a very young age, we tell our girls, women, that at some point you will start having periods, you'll develop into a woman, and then at some point you'll stop having periods and your hormones will go away and you'll have hot flashes. And what you're not told is that you'll also go through these other mood swings and edginess and sleep difficulties and weight gain around the middle and stuff. But men are never told anything about a hormonal decline. Men just have this decline. It's very insidious. It's not abrupt. And men, I think, will be in denial about it because take your average 45-year-old man, got the career, he can get up, he can go to work, he can provide for the family. That's all he can do. He comes home, boom, he's on the couch drinking a beer, he's watching sports, watching other people do active things that he once did. And if you ask him, he understands that he's out of shape, overweight, doesn't feel well. He also becomes more depressed and withdrawn and doesn't go out and socialize and do the things that he used to enjoy doing. A lot of that's loss of testosterone, but he doesn't see it that way. What he sees is that, yes, I'm 45 years old, but in my mind, I'm really 19 or 20, and if I would, just as soon as I get the 401k paid off for the year, I'm going to cut back on the work, I'm going to sleep at night, I'm going to go start hitting the gym, and I'll be everything that I was 20 years ago. And that's just not the case. If you try to do that, a lot of times, you may get away with it, it may work, but it's not going to feel good. Working out hurts, and you don't get the immediate results that you're accustomed to having, and you thought you were going to go into the gym and just start blasting it out again and then feel great and look great again. That doesn't happen, so you give it up and you go back. It's a lot easier to lay on the couch and drink a beer. Our culture has allowed that to happen now, so that it's sort of more acceptable for that to happen. But really, this is, I think, in large part related to testosterone decline. And here it is in a graph, and you can see that it's a very insidious decline. Men's testosterone levels peak in the late teenage years or early 20s. At about age 25 across the board, it starts this decline. Now, what we see is that at about 700, or in the upper third of the reference range, and the reference ranges are different for different labs, but generally 300 to 1100, or you can just round that off to 1000, but the upper third of that is going to be over 700, so between 700 and 1100. And if we draw a line here between 700 and we carry that over here, we end up at about late 30s, 38, 40, 35, 42, something like that. That's when our testosterone line crosses 700 and when we start not feeling so well. We've had this decline going on for a while, but 700, there seems to be something about that I've noticed in my practice. And actually there are two studies that bear out the upper third sort of notion. There's the Rotterdam trial, or the Rotterdam study, which is in Holland, and the Rancho Bernardo study here in Southern California. These are longitudinal observational studies that have been ongoing since the 70s. And if you're familiar with the Framingham study or the Nurses' Health study or the Physician study, those are also other observational studies where we just kind of sit back and see what happens to a community so we can decide what's good for them and what's bad for them, because we don't know until we look at it and sort of analyze it. What these two studies have shown, and they're on opposite sides of the world, which is pretty amazing, but they've shown that if you compare men in the lower third testosterone levels to age-matched controls in the upper third testosterone levels, the guys in the lower third testosterone have a 40% increase in cardiovascular disease in Holland. So if you live in Holland, you want to have upper third. If you live in Southern California, you also want to have upper third because the endpoint for this study was death. So all-cause mortality has a 40% increase when you compare age-matched controls with lower third testosterone levels to upper third testosterone levels. And it's as important as LDL cholesterol as far as an independent predictor of death, of early death, if you control for everything else that you can think of that you might think that would kill us early. The one caveat about that is that gives you a pretty pleasing piece of data that says guys feel better over 700, and the data seem to show that you want to be over 700 for health reasons, but you have to remember those are observational studies, not interventional, so now we're intervening. It'll take us 20, 50 years. These studies have been going on since the 70s. If we fast forward now another 30 years, we may know if replacing testosterone is all that it's made up to be. That's, one of the downfalls is that we don't have specific data to be able to tell us this. We didn't have specific data to tell us a lot of things in medicine.